Welcome back, and starting out the second half of the week, what I'm doing here is a bit of a test for Mark on the ailerons to see how much play we have in the system with a load on them, and once he has those numbers he can extrapolate and determine whether the flight loads are going to be more than what we have in terms of what the play is in the ailerons. So anyway, so how I'm doing it is just got that little plastic bag there clamped onto the trailing edge of one of the ailerons, and I've got these weights that are about 4.5 pounds each, and I put one of them in there, and then I measure with the caliper there. I measure what the deflection is, how much did it move down based upon having that weight on it, and that's basically measuring how much the ailerons or how much play is in the actual system itself. Because I've got the two cables there that run up from the keel, I've got them clamped in place while I was doing this test, so the system can't really move. But here what we're doing is just determining how much flex is in the cable and if there's any sort of slop in the rest of the system. So I ended up putting 3 weights there, taking 3 different measurements for Mark, and just looking at how it came out. With the first weight it was about 0.4 of an inch, and second weight it was 0.8 of an inch, and with the third weight on there it was 1.2 inches was the deflection. And this was prior to actually fixing this problem that we had with the pulleys that were bonded to that floor there under the keel flexing. But as I said, I've isolated that area so that doesn't affect this test. And actually since this test I think I've put a little bit more tension on the cables. So I actually should do this again really for Mark now that it's been tensioned what I think is correctly. And as you'll see coming up, we've resolved that problem with the aileron pulleys moving on that floor where the floor was flexing, and I'll show you in a second how we ended up doing it. So yeah, I got this test done for Mark, but I haven't had any feedback from him yet about what the implications are for these numbers. But they're basically just going to use those numbers and determine how the aircraft will handle normal flight loads with the sort of forces that act on the ailerons while you're flying. And so I ended up fixing the problem of that movement by creating a little template out of a sanding block, and then just to get dimensions, and then the sanding block was the same as these tubes. So we had these carbon tubes lying around that we were going to use on the seat mounts, but didn't end up actually using it. So how it's going to work is that I've got these are going to sort of wedge up next to the pulleys. They're behind the keel and under the keel, and sort of act like a big straight I-beam sort of thing to stop the floor from flexing. And you'll see how I put that in a minute. And meanwhile, Jeff's in the process here of creating a nice little enclosed box there in the nose to put our ballast in, and Mark is projecting that we need to pretty much have 100 pounds up the front anytime we only have like a single pilot in there or we're lightly loaded. So for the first flight testing we definitely want to have a good forward CG, so we'll be putting 2 of those 50-pound bags that I got up there. And this is solving that problem now. So I'm putting a nice big thick, sort of about 3/8 of an inch thick of high sole on the bottom of this beam here, a little carbon tube, and that thing doesn't weigh anything. Literally you can't even feel that you're holding it. And so once I got that on there, I very carefully threaded it down through the opening in the back there, so I didn't touch anything else along the way down, and then had a little maneuver there where I turned it around and slid it into place and basically pushed it down. As you can see, that's it sitting there. It's a bit hard to focus with my camera there, but that's it, and you can see I've got a nice little fillet of the high sole as it squeezed out there on the one side, and you can see it's right next to that aileron pulley there, and it was the aileron pulley was sort of flexing with the cable pulling. And we let it set up. So this was Wednesday afternoon that I did this. We let it set up all over Thursday, and then just Friday morning tightened back up the aileron cables, because I actually loosened all the cables off while we did this so the floor could relax again into the normal position. And yeah, that's the one on the other side. You can see it's right next to where the pulley is. That little white thing on the right hand side of the screen is the little guard on the pulley there. So anyway, and I also put some high sol on the side there so it would bond to the keel. So yeah, we let it set up, and then on Friday just tightened up the cables and did our little test with the stick, and after tightening the cables the stick hadn't even moved, so forward didn't even flex. So pretty much happy that that's solved that problem, at least sort of 99%. And Jeff and Devon here are doing final test fit on the cowling now that the wings are on. We did it before the wings were on just to make sure that everything was done with the nut plates that needed to be done up front around where the firewall is, and now they're doing a fit round there and a final little trim around the edges there where everything meets up to the wings. So yeah, that all came out well, and we weren't sure if we were going to have to make a height adjustment on the engine again using those cross bars that go on the top, but we didn't have to in the end, and it fit nicely. So all that's left there is to have the spinner on there for the final look, and obviously the parachute strap cover's not on there yet, or the parachute opening cover. So anyway, the cowling comes back off again because obviously got work to do on the engine, but you know, definitely wanted to get that all set, so and we can put those cowling bits aside now, and they're ready to go on when the time comes. And up front, that box is all set up now and cleaned up as well, and you can see Jeff's got 2 of the bags in there now, the 2 50-pound bags, and a little ratchet strap over the top there just to hold it all in place so it doesn't move around, and put a slot down through the bottom so for the ratchet strap to go through. And moving on to some electrical stuff here that I hadn't finished off. This is a little inline fuse that I needed for the pitot heat system, so it's a little 25 amp one there, and just got a connector there that goes to the main sort of battery jumper, and then the other end goes to the relay. Yeah, so I've got that wired in, and Devon's just doing a little bit of sanding here on the leading edges of the strakes, because when those were filled, they didn't get like a second round of fill on there, so there's a bunch of little pinholes in there, and Jeff was kind of worried about you know, aerodynamic problems with the little pinholes in there, so he's fixing those. And I've been doing some work up in the nose there, finally putting some wire loom there around all the wiring that goes down through the keel, and just tidying everything up there where the wires go up through the bulkhead. So there's the wire loom there in the center of the screen there, that black one. Put some cable ties around there to hold it in place, and so it's all neat and tidy there now, as well as much as I can make it, you know, because there's a lot of wires coming through there, and then they split into those conduits, and up the top they split out into these various through hole connectors there, so I can probably tidy it up a little bit more, but it's looking better than it was, and nothing's touching the elevator controls there, so probably a little bit more work to do there to finish that off. And so the crane scale that I ordered arrived there on Friday afternoon, and we hooked it up there to the winglets, as you can see, and did a similar thing as I did on the ailerons, where we started out with 50 and then went to 100 and then 150 and then 200 pounds of force pulling on the winglets, pulling them together. And then what we did was a couple of different things. We measured the height of the leading edge of the wing on the outboard end, and that's what Jeff's doing here, and then also on the trailing edge for each of the different loads, and using that to determine whether or not the wing was twisting, and did the same thing on the winglets to see if they were twisting, and that's what I'm doing here, pulling a measurement from the other winglet to the leading edge and also the trailing edge. And then we also measured how much they deflected inboard. So anyway, there's the numbers that we're sending off to Mark to have a look at, but turns out that the wings themselves weren't twisting at all, pretty much the same amount of lift on the front as on the back of the wings, and the winglets had a similar type of thing. They didn't really twist at all. And then the actual deflection of the wings compared to what Mark had projected, we actually had less deflection than what he had projected for the loads that he'd given us, and with only like 4 inches total deflection across the two for 200 pounds. So pretty happy about that, and I'm fairly confident now that we're not going to see anything weird going on with the wings because of the winglets. And somebody had asked me about showing how the elevator works here in the gap. So there you can see fully nose down position there, and the gap is completely closed up there. And we actually had almost the same geometry as this on the model. as I was looking at the other day. And then fully down, you can see a nice big gap in there to allow the air to flow through and give you the lift that you need. And we're probably going to have more lift than we need. We may have to limit the travel on this, and it takes quite a bit of effort to pull on there right now because of that sort of fiberglass spring that I have in there. But when the electric trim's working there, you're not going to have that same problem. And there you can see I've got the ailerons moving there up and down, so that's all working nicely now, and very little play in there if anything, just a tiny bit at the stick there. And then I just threw those other two 50-pound bags that we have under the seat there, because when I start taxiing it around again, I want to have more weight in there, so that's equivalent to having a skinny person up in the front riding there with me. And I'll probably have to tie those down. I'll probably put them in the seat and put the seatbelt around them. And also another nice thing I got working too was, I had the AC control here, and it wasn't set up to have like permanent power on there to remember the setting that you have, and I managed to get that wired in as well, so now it remembers the previous setting, which is super nice. So there's the aircraft on Friday afternoon sitting in the hangar. So all the cover plates are done now for all the access panels, with all the nut plates done for those. The cowling's all been fitted nicely. Still got a short list of little jobs and stuff need to be done, but basically sitting there waiting patiently for that new coupling to come back from the machine shop across the way. Then we can get that hooked back up, the connection between the flywheel of the engine and the lower part of the redrive reconnected, and I can take it out and taxi it again some more and slowly work up some speed and to the point where I can test the ailerons and the rudders, and then eventually see if I can get it down the runway just with the nose wheel off, and then waiting on the registration so we can get the airworthiness certificate. And so anyway, that's where we are right now, and that's our update for this week. Thanks for tuning in, and tune in again on Tuesday and see what's going on next week.